Okay, so first off, thank you for being here.
It is awesome to be here, Jordan.
Yeah, I'm glad we're able to. I've been a big fan of yours and admirer of yours for a long time. So when Dallas, he actually told me, I think when we were shooting the scene between Little James and Jesus, before, when I was going through hair and makeup, he mentioned that he had talked to you about it, and that alone was really exciting. And then seeing your conversation with Dallas was really cool as well. So
It was a very moving scene.
Well,
He said,
thanks.
"What did you think?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
was moved." And it was amazing also be interviewed by Dallas. But thank you for having me on your show, and hello to everyone out there.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that scene and about the the relationship between faith and healing. Obviously, something that I know you've talked a lot about. It's something I've become really passionate about talking about. But I usually start from the beginning. So, your childhood, like what was childhood like for you? And one thing that you mentioned in that interview with Dallas that I find fascinating, and I've talked to a lot of other people within the disabled community about it. But the moment that you realize or that you started to view your differences as like a flaw or as a weakness because of how others were treating you. I remember specifically that moment for me, and I'll share that with you as well. But I'd love to talk about your childhood and then what was that moment where it shifted and you started to kind of think negatively about your differences.
Dude, can I say I applaud you for doing a show like this? This is amazing. Yeah, look, such an honor just to share my story with your listeners a little bit. Born without limbs. If you're listening on audio, you can't see that I have no arms and legs, but I have on the bottom left of my torso a little foot, a little appendage with two toes. And my childhood, first and foremost, so thankful that I had a loving home. My mom and dad. It took my dad quicker, if you will, to embrace the circumstance.
Yeah.
But my mom, obviously she just had to go through a little bit more emotions and a different point of view as the mother, grieving and shock and questioning, especially the fact that she had a lot of medical background as well.
Yeah.
With no medical explanation, and even my brother and sister born after me with no disabilities whatsoever.
Did your mother have any guilt? Because I feel like there's mom guilt is a real thing, especially her growing
Yeah,
you. I feel like psychologically sometimes you can wonder, like, is this my fault somehow?
Yeah, well, let's deep dive into that then a little bit first. So, she actually was a midwife, and she was the head of like 300 births in a hospital per month, and so she knew what thalidomide was. She actually didn't even take caffeine, no painkillers for headache or anything like that. She was extremely careful with her pregnancy, and she'd been seeing all her career these drug addicted women having perfectly beautiful babies, right? So that was part of her grieving process. Like these women who didn't look after their pregnancy, here I am looking after my pregnancy with all that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have a limbless child. And what was interesting, Jordan, was they had 3 sonograms and they had no idea that I had no limbs until I was actually born.
Wow.
And so it was a huge shock. And they were just too excited, right? But my mom told my dad there's something wrong. He's not moving as much. He's small. Something's wrong. Even when they actually wanted to know if I'm a male or female baby, they said the legs were not in the way. He's a boy for sure.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge shock. The grief, the questions. She first needed to know what happened, and no one knew what happened. And so she then figured out she couldn't blame the doctors, but there was nothing that she did wrong either.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this grieving process of, first of all, mourning the dream of a healthy baby. Now she had a healthy baby, but with a few bits missing.
Yeah.
And in their faith in God, I mean, my dad was 27 when he planted their first church. 11 months later, I was born. So new pastor, church plant, now the pastor's son being born without limbs. I mean, you can imagine. So went through a lot of that shame, guilt, like all that stuff. But yeah, we all go through those things.
Yeah.
So they embraced me, took me home. They had an incredible family support network around them. even to the point where both of my parents' parents said, if you give him up for adoption, we'll take him.
Wow.
But they knew that, no one's going to love their son as much as, they love them. They love me. And they were not thinking of adopting. And that was the way that they thought. We're just going to do our best and trust God in the rest. Now, we love seeing adoption happen. My friends actually have adopted special needs children that inspired me. Me and my wife are actually starting the paperwork to adopt children, and a child. Children.
All the children.
We have enough. We have 4 biological children, but when you look at these kids who have disabilities, I know it. It's different when you have a disability. So many things you and I could talk about. The dynamic of, I don't even know if you had siblings, but the dynamic of them feeling like they're in our shadow. Mom and dad had to focus in on me more. And what does that mean?
We were a little more high
dynamic,
maintenance,
right?
Yeah.
And then me treating my brother like a slave. You know what I mean? Like feeling like I was entitled to him, then having to do things for me. And even my parents calling my brother Aaron to hold Moses' hands up. You know what I mean?
Wow,
Very interesting. So many things we could get into, but my parents embraced me and they always said, God has a plan for you. Don't worry about what people think of you. In 1982, that's when I was born. 1989, I was supposed to go to school. 1989, the state law in education in Australia disallowed me from being integrated into the mainstream school system. I was supposed to be segregated. But little did anyone know that my mom would be used in the hands of God to then actually go in full respect and full humility, but mama bear courage, go there and say, can we change the law? And they did. And so I was actually the first student that was handicapped, basically, to be integrated. I actually was Citizen of the Year of Australia on national television for that in 1990. And so all of this to say, I was the only one going to school. I was, in a wheelchair, and everybody looked at me, and, I'd come home crying, like, why was I born this way? I don't understand. God loves me. Where is he? So that was the childhood. And how could any good come from this? How could I ever find a wife? At age 8, I convinced myself, Jordan, that I'd never get married.
Wow.
Even if I got married, I can't even hold my wife's hand. I convinced myself that I would always be bullied, that I'd never get a job, that I'd always be a dependent, that I'd never be independent, that all these things just surmounted, but by the grace of God and mercy of God, I had the loving home, and I want to start there. So that's the beginnings.
I love that. There is so much I relate
we
to.
could talk.
My sister, so I was, in addition to my scoliosis and cerebral palsy, I went through a bunch of surgeries to correct my curved spine and my hips. And but I also have severe asthma. So I was hospitalized from age like 6 to 18, probably 4 times a year because of the asthma. And half of those times I would be in ICU. I was intubated when I was 18 for 2 weeks. And so there was a lot, like I spent a big chunk of my time in the hospital. And I have 2 younger sisters and an older brother. And my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, I remember as a little kid saying, like, it's not fair Jordan gets to go to the hospital. I want to go to the hospital because she saw that, like, people bring me balloons and toys and all of this stuff. So it is such, in hindsight, whenever you look back, it's such an interesting dynamic. But yeah, having a loving home was key for me as well, because my mom is the type of person that no matter what I could tell her today that I want to change careers and I want to be a firefighter, and she would totally support it. She would send me a list of like places I can start training, or like she would do whatever she could to support that. And because of that, like, just total faith in my abilities, even if no one else has that same faith in my abilities. She that helped me believe in myself a little bit more. And the moment though that I began to, because there were times I knew I walked different from other kids, I knew my back was crooked, I knew all of that, but I didn't feel bad about it as a child. The other kids accepted me in elementary school, and I played with them the same way. Like there wasn't the insecurities yet. And then I went to high school, and it was my first public school. And I was just different enough that it made me like an easy target. I knew nobody. And I couldn't really find a group to fit in with. I bounced around. I tried different clothes. I wore a wig, like a little afro wig, to see if anyone would notice, and no one noticed. So it was like all of these weird tactics to try to be seen and try to find my place. And then one day I remember these kids invited me to come sit with them and started talking about acting. And they asked, what I do. So I told them I act. And at the time I had done a couple of little guest spots on like Nickelodeon shows or Disney things. So I told them that. And I was starting to get excited that like, oh, these people are showing interest. They care. And then they said, oh, I didn't know they let cripples on that show. And that was the moment that I was like, oh, this thing that makes me different is bad. This is something I need to be ashamed of. And around that, within that same year, I was starting to have casting directors comment on it as well and say, hey, can you try it again without the limp, or can you tone the limp down? And things like that. And it became this thing where I felt like I had been given this gift and this blessing of like, and this passion for acting. I felt like I was given that for a reason, but then I felt like God also gave me this curse that would prevent me from ever realizing, the potential of that gift. So it was a weird relationship I had with my limp, and I became suicidal as a teenager. I dealt with severe depression. But that was the moment for me. And I want to talk more about the moment that I started to see it as something to be proud of and something to embrace later on in life. But what was did you have a moment for you that you started to view that as a bad thing?
What a compelling story you have.
Oh, thank you.
Have you written a book?
I'm working on it, actually.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You got to write a book.
I may reach out for some advice in that.
I'm down area. The street. You got me.
Yeah.
For me, so your question was, how was my journey on that?
Yeah.
In that context, for sure. I hated the idea that that my parents would believe in a God who didn't make sense to me.
Right.
And who was okay at that point to believe that he's still good, even though I've asked for a miracle. You read the Bible and you see these miracles and you ask, why not me? Like, why don't you get, and then you go to school and these bullies who tease you, for me, I looked at these kids and I'm like, they don't deserve their arms. Like, why didn't you give them arms? I rip them off and give them to me. You know what I mean? And the whole journey of wondering why was sometimes all I could think of. But I did have a joyous, couple years, like ages 6, 7, 8. It wasn't all depressed, but the dark days came at age 8 to 12.
Okay.
And so for me, my dad, if I knew I'm not going to be a firefighter, right? Like,
right.
I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. But my dad said push in mathematics. So my parents actually, just so you understand my parents, where they came from, they fled communism regime of Yugoslavia in 1962 and 1969. They met in Australia. They were in refugee camps. They came to Australia with nothing.
Wow.
So then they had a limbless boy, and they told the limbless boy, listen, be thankful for what you have instead of focusing on what you don't have. And God didn't give you arms and legs, but he gave you a brain. Use your brain. You're smart. And don't be lazy. And so they didn't buy me toys. If I wanted something from the store, I would make money vacuuming the floor for $2 a week. And then it would teach me how to save and be thankful for what I had, and even give me a sense of dignity as well, that I could do something.
Yeah.
And so in that, it taught me a level of gratitude, that if he gave me everything I wanted when I wanted it, I'd never be a person of gratitude, which is to me the secret of all secrets, where we come to God. And it's actually this mindset that despite your circumstances, even when you don't get a miracle, you can be one. He can give me arms and legs. He doesn't have to give me arms and legs. I can pray for arms and legs, but I don't need arms and legs. I can have a pair of shoes in my closet today, which I do just in case he gives me arms and legs. But whatever it is, I just know that I love him and he loves me. Now, that was when I found him, but pre those seasons of trusting in him, I didn't want to talk to him. I became number one at chess. I became number one at math, and that helped me to like have a foundation of confidence. And if I can't run track, if I can't do football, at least I'm smarter than you at math. That was kind of like my coping mechanism, which was cool. But what I realized was people were judging me for how I look, and I'm like, well, what if I judge you for your nose and your hair and your freckles and your shoes and the way you walk? Like, I mean, big deal. Like, big deal. I have no arms and legs. But it was the point where you were sharing, right? You didn't think it was such a big deal until people told you about your limp and maybe that it was a bad thing. That was as soon as I went to school. And I'm like, oh, I am different, but it's not a good thing. And so at age 8, I got angry because there were no answers, and I prayed for a miracle. There was no miracles going on. Faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. And today, my passion, a lot of people are saying these days in churches, well, just give, do good, be good. And basically God can't say no to your prayers because you pray in his will and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry, but his perfect will for you, number one, is to go home to heaven. And so that's why Christians are going to die. So if you continue to pray, God, I never want to die, I never want to die, I never want to die, guess what? One day you're going to die. Yeah. So same thing with cancer. Christians die of cancer.
Yeah.
But we know, though, which it was hard for me to believe. It's like, okay, if you didn't give me this pain, then why don't you take it away? So the first fundamental principle is understanding that disabilities, cancer, sickness, death came from sin. And the sin came from the fall of man. From the devil. God didn't have to allow the devil to come in like a serpent, but he allowed the devil to come into the Garden of Eden to Eve, and then Adam and Eve fell in their free will. In their free will, now we have mosquitoes biting us, we have death, we have cancer, we have disabilities. Then we die here on earth, and then we go to heaven based on our decision and our purpose in him. Do we believe in the salvation of Jesus Christ, or do we not, period? I wanted to believe, Jordan, that the Bible was fully true. I wanted to believe in heaven, the power of the resurrection. I knew I was a liar if I lied once. I know if I stole once, I'm a thief. I knew that I wasn't perfect for heaven. But I just didn't understand, if he really loves me, where are my arms and legs? So I actually tried to commit suicide at age 10.
Wow.
Convinced myself that he had forgotten me when he, said in the Bible, he has a plan for me. He's like, well, it's not for me. That can't be for me. And so I tried to drown myself with 6 inches of water in the bathtub, and it's very scary trying to attempt suicide. Sucking in water, trying to figure out how much do you swallow before you inhale it, and then you're done. And it was premeditated. For 2 years I'd been thinking about it. And so the third time I rolled over, though, by the mercy of God, God gave me a picture in my mind. My mom and my dad crying at my grave, wishing they could have done something more. And I realized at that point there is something worse than having a limbless kid. It's a limbless kid who commits suicide and leaving that behind. And so I didn't want to do that. But it was done because it was not just because I loved them, but it was because of their love for me, their persistent love. You're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. I just want you to know, parents, even if your children get annoyed when you tell them, just keep on telling them, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. Because that persistent love is needed in the soul, because we're never going to go through life without resistance.
Yeah.
But if you embrace resistance, that's how you get resilience. No one gets resilience without resistance, and no one's going to go through life without resistance. And in fact, if you're a Christian without resistance, maybe you're actually not standing in the right place.
Sure.
And so when you know that all fundamentally and principally, by the grace of God, I decided to stay, didn't really talk to him for years. I realized what I really needed was my soul to be saved and restored, and needing his peace, and knowing my purpose, and having that faith to know that his ways and thoughts are higher than mine. if he chooses to give me arms and legs, it doesn't change how good he is. He is God. If he chooses not to give me arms and legs, it doesn't change anything about God. He is God and he is good. If he can use me, and
Yeah.
that's when I gave my life at 15 years old, I said, Jesus, if you don't give me arms and legs, can I just ask then, use then my pain? Don't waste this.
Yeah.
Just use it. And I'm all in. And I gave my life to Jesus. God, if you give me arms and legs, I'll trust you. If you don't give me arms and legs, I trust you.
One of the big things that's helped me as well, since we have embraced my condition and made it part of my character on The Chosen, it's the children that have reached out, and the parents of children, and just other people in general, whether they have a disability or not. I've had kids reach out that have severe acne that felt seen in that little James and Jesus moment, that have asked God, like, why won't you heal my acne? Like, they have their insecurity is just as real as either of ours. And, body image issues, learning disabilities, like any number of things.
Yeah.
And, it's just been, now I'm at a point, and I want to ask you this question too. When Dallas asked me if I would be comfortable using my disability in the character, I said yes, but I was also terrified because I knew I would have to be more vulnerable as an actor than I had ever been before.
How old were you at that point?
That was, let's see,
Ish.
I think it was 30,
Amazing.
29, 30.
So you're already married, you're already a father.
Yeah. And
this is real, man.
Yeah. And it was like, becoming a father definitely changed my perspective, because I remember loving my children so, like, more than I can ever even explain. And they love me too and accept me. And I remember thinking, I just had this thought one day that, like, if they can accept me as I am, they wouldn't want me to walk any different. They love the way I walk. I'm their dad. So if they can accept me like this, why can't I accept myself? If any of them walked like I do, I would love and accept them without any issue. Yeah. Like I would think they're just as beautiful as they are now. And so that helped me be a little kinder to myself. But I still hated walking past a reflective surface. I still hated seeing myself walk on camera. That was at the forefront of my mind in every audition. Every role that I got was don't limp, rather than just playing the character. And so Dallas doing that, it was terrifying, but it gave me this freedom that I didn't really anticipate, which was, now I just get to act. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about whether or not I'm limping. And that's carried over into other roles. I just did 1883 and worked on that for 5 or 6 months. My character didn't specifically have a disability, but I wasn't worried about whether or not I was limping. I was just playing the character, and it was liberating. But Dallas asked me when he decided to make it part of the character, he said, if God could heal you right now, just out of curiosity, he was like, if God could heal you right now, would you want to be healed? And I told him no, but I really would. Like, in that moment, I was like, if I was being honest, I would have said yes, I would want to be healed. But now, just a couple years later, going through all of this, getting to act out this scene where I'm literally, not quite yelling, but I'm angry at Jesus for not healing me. That was a really surreal experience as well. But getting to act all of that out and having him tell me that, you will be healed one day. It's a matter of time. And all of the things that he says in the scene, it was like running a marathon. By the end of the day, I was just totally drained in the best way. And then the response after of all of these people, I've developed really strong connections and relationships with a lot of the fans that have reached out that have disabilities or children that are bullied. And now, for the first time in my life, I genuinely, if I had the choice, I don't think I would want to be healed because of how and it's not that I couldn't, still do God's work if I was healed. Obviously, you have a totally different story at that point. Sure. But I'm really enjoying being able to, like, using this now for good. And like you said, you don't waste this pain, like, use it.
Right.
And I feel totally, there are still moments of insecurity, of course, but I feel totally at peace with who I am and with the body that I've been given, and proud of it. And maybe my asthma. If God, if you want to heal my asthma, that'd be. I'll take that one.
In Jesus' name, we pray for that asthma to go. Amen.
But as far as the limp, it's something that I think that's the thing I want to ask. Like, one, if you had the option right now to be healed, would you?
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to dive into a little bit of the faith healing and how some people's opinion that everyone will be healed if they ask or have enough faith. I want to talk about that because I've come across some fans and people that have reached out and pushed back against that scene a bit. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how to.
I want to start there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's start there.
Me there.
Yeah.
There are churches who, first of all, they have no education whatsoever in how to even embrace a family affected with a disability. And the number one ministry for that is johnnyandfriends.org. Joni Eareckson Tada.
Yeah.
17, 19 years old, cracks her neck. She's quadriplegic, amazing woman of God, ambassador for Jesus, legend, still here with us, and a dear friend of mine. And she helped us in the early days. It's not based on your faith. God knows the desires of your heart. It's also nothing wrong with you asking God to still heal your child of cerebral palsy.
Right.
You can love your child with all your heart and still pray that God still gives that child a less of a burden of life,
Sure.
whether it's a mental handicap, whether it's cancer, whether it's anything, right? And all these things. And there's nothing wrong with praying. I want people to know, don't feel guilty for hoping one day, okay? And you can still have contentment and be thankful and gratitude for every day and still feel deep down, it would be nice.
Yeah.
Right? So I want parents to understand that. And you having, no arms and no legs, Nick, do you still want arms and legs? Well, first of all, I know that it's not dependent on how much money I give or how obedient I am to the Lord or some sin in my life. There are some people who are saying, oh, you got the flu because of your sin. Shut up.
Yeah.
You have the flu because, you're not, there's something wrong. What are you doing? Where's the sin? Confess. I'm like, shut up, right?
Yeah.
All these things. So even Joni Eareckson Tada, she said, you feel to pray for me? Go for it. I'm not going to stop you. Am I happy today? Yeah. Would she love to get out of a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's that freedom of knowing, though, that the number one joy is abiding in him and he abiding in us. When people see a limp or a limbless man or someone with cerebral palsy, guess what happens? Their smile is noticed. Their smile is noticed.
Yeah.
More than anybody. And that's your story. You see, your story ain't done yet.
Mm-hmm.
Your history is his story. And so Champions for the Brokenhearted with Life Without Limbs, we understand that it's more than just me and my story. We talk about the unborn, we talk about the human traffic, we talk about people with disabilities, and that's our March theme. Each month we have a theme. And I would love to interview you on that show.
I love that, yeah.
That would be amazing.
I love all of that. Like, it's something, you've been at this for a lot longer than me in terms of being in the public eye and being a spokesperson for a certain community and for offering, hope and encouragement to people. And now, through The Chosen and through this character in the podcast, I'm blessed enough to be beginning that. I've started doing some more speaking engagements. Awesome. And I've been traveling around doing that. And it's been a learning process of, trying to figure out all of the logistics of it and figuring out the structure and stuff that I want to work with. But one thing that I've come across that maybe you'll have some advice is the people who do, like, you touched on the Christians who say you just need to pray harder. And among the thousands of positive comments of other people with disabilities that are reaching out and saying, I felt like Jesus was talking to me in that scene, and all of these amazing messages and emails that I've been getting, there's every now and then the one that says that scene was blasphemous. That scene was God does want to heal you. God never would have not healed someone that asked. Like all of these things.
It's about educating the church on miracles. It's about educating the church on actually a stance as to where we are at. Because there are people who are not believing correctly. This is, to me, such an important show, a podcast that emanates truth. So thank you, because outside of Johnny Erickson Tada, there aren't a lot of other people. I mean, there are some out there for sure. And there are some wonderful speakers out there. And books.
Mm-hmm.
Jen Bricker is amazing too. You gotta talk to her one day.
Yeah.
She's a friend of mine. But I just feel this is such a beautiful moment for me, just to meet you and speak this way to the audience that you had. Jordan, I don't ever think I've ever had an audience like this, where you can just outright share this stuff in such a comfortable way and just having the conversation, but also not shying away from the most difficult questions. So I love you, man.
I love you too.
I'm sorry if I said too
No.
much, but I'm not. But
No.
But this is really a passion of mine, you
Yeah.
know, and I want people to know, like, we will do what we're supposed to do. And I'm not afraid of saying what you're doing that actually may be needing a different approach and perspective. And I'm always
Yeah.
open to having a healthy debate.
Yeah.
Always. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, have the conversation. Have the conversations with, okay, why hasn't your pastor talked about life?
Yeah.
And the value of the unborn. Oh, it's political. No, let's have a conversation about how you can actually have a conversation about the broken foster care and adoption, about the human trafficked, about the abuse. Do you know that 1 in 3 girls in America have been sexually abused by age 17? 1 out of 5 boys by age 17 sexually abused in America.
Yeah.
We're the #1 leading human trafficking nation in the world right now. We tripled the quadruple in 24 months. Human trafficking in Texas, we've tripled the quadruple.
Wow.
Of the annual data just came in.
It's insane.
It is insane. It's insane. And so this is, you can't talk about God and love without talking about the value of life, the miraculous, and the church actually waking up,
Mm-hmm.
actually getting off the ventilator, because some don't even know they're on one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I love that. I mean, you mentioning like having some humility and I think when it comes to, the prosperity gospel, a lot of the people who,
I'm not saying that people haven't been saved from
Sure, yeah.
Sorry.
No, but a lot of the people that are of the mindset that, you got to pray harder, you're gonna get what you're asking for.
Yeah.
You just have to do this.
Yeah.
They're typically in positions of privilege. They're typically able-bodied. They aren't in need in the same way that some other people might be.
Yeah.
And I think it is so important and I try to do this on the podcast as well, have people that have different struggles, different, I had Rami Youssef, who's a Muslim comedian who has a TV show on Hulu that's a hilarious show. He talked a lot about being a Muslim teenager in New York right after 9/11 and what he experienced with that. And,
Can't imagine.
I had a father on who lost his daughter in a mass shooting and when she was 14 years old at Parkland in Florida. And I've had people with all sorts of different things that, and sometimes their religious beliefs or their political opinions may differ from mine, but I think it's so important to have conversations and to just listen to other people as a human being.
Yes.
And to love them, to have compassion for them. Even if you still come out of the conversation disagreeing, you at least can empathize with them and understand how they came to their conclusion, how they got to where they are. And I think that the church in general, that's been something I've had an issue with in America in particular. I think that we have a bit of an ego in America and the American church at times where there's not always that humility and willingness to look in the mirror and to ask the tough questions and to say, hey, what are we doing wrong? What can we do to lead with more compassion and empathy, and I think that there is a lot of room to grow in all of us and within the church, and it's easy to become stagnant, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, was to grow as a person and to hear people and to share my story, and in hopes that it can help others maybe do the same. So
I love it. And I'm sorry if I came off strong, but I'm just more angry at the churches, more than anything. Only because, here's some music to face. 100,000 churches with $490 billion worth of debt for buildings that was mostly emptied. And we can't take 500,000 kids off the foster care system. I mean, seriously, dude.
Yeah.
So forgive the Christians for being asleep. And if this is a wake-up moment, welcome. I love you. Let's go. Let's get learning and let's move. Yes, and may we reach out to be the hands and feet and love people and preach the gospel with or without words.
Yeah. Amen. Now, I want to, before we wrap it up, I want to ask you what I end all of my podcasts with, and I gave you some I gave you a little heads up before we started. So sure. I always end by asking, what is the thing that you love most about yourself?
Oh gosh. Well, let me reframe the question. What am I most thankful for me in my life first, if I may preface
Sure.
it? Any good that you see in me, honestly, with no false humility, it's in him, for him, through him. Even the breath that I have is his. I'm glad I know the truth, and that's truly set me free from all the fear and anything that the world could ever give me or take away from me or tell me. I know the truth. And I'm glad. What do I like about myself? Coming to your question, I love the fact that it was groomed by my parents, that when people come up to me and they're a little awkward,
Yeah.
they said, look, well, they just don't know what to do. Do they shake your hand? Do they talk to you? Do they look at you? Do we ask you for help? All these things. I mean, you and I could have 10 podcasts together actually on
Yeah.
all this and break it down. Like
series.
just that. Yeah, no, I'm actually tempted to think more about that with you and figure what that looks like.
Yeah.
Because so many people, like a practical level, like it's even people who actually have a heart for people with disabilities, like, hey, tell me, or a caregiver, like, because I've had caregivers and there's people that ask like, hey, I'm helping someone with something. Do I do this? Do I not do this? When do I lean in? When do I go? Like, and then anyway, so what I like though about what my parents basically taught me was just relax. Like, don't be offended if someone asks you, do you want help? Do you need help? Just freaking relax. They've never seen anyone like you. The kids are pointing at me. They've never seen anyone like you.
Yeah.
But what I love most was they taught me just to be myself and talk.
Mm-hmm.
And just, hi. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And I was, hi. And they said hi back. And I'm like, oh, I can have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And in that conversation, then I took it a little bit more and started saying jokes. Like if it's a cold morning, hey, it's cold, can't feel my hands. And then, the ice breaks, and then they're actually conversing with me on an eye level,
Yeah.
And so I think the humor part has obviously really helped with all the beginning years of me learning the ropes of, 3,500 speeches. Humor is always there.
Yeah.
And I think humor is a wonderful thing. It's like music. It's like movies that really connect and open the heart in a way that brings down the barriers. And so the preconceived ideas of what is he here? Now he's going to make me feel sorry for him, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, he can even make fun of himself.
Right.
This guy's cool. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
It's like addressing the elephant in the room
There you
because
go.
people don't know how
They
to
don't know.
react. Yeah, it's something too that I'm really aggressive in my pursuit for of working with filmmakers that I admire or finding other acting projects. And now I lead with my limp. I like when I'm sending emails to producers or casting directors. I always put in a little note. I mention like, I have a limp, I have cerebral palsy and scoliosis. I tell them a bit of my story, send them my footage, and then I always end the emails by saying, I know this is a little unorthodox, but I'm just trying to do anything I can to give myself a leg up, pun intended. And it's something that they always tell actors, find the thing that sets you apart or that, it makes you stick out in their mind after all, 100 auditions. And I am just now realizing that like mine was built in. I've had it all along.
So good.
And instead of worrying about it and viewing it as a bad thing, I'm like, no, I'm own it. It's the hand that
Yeah.
we've been dealt. So yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that approach.
Kids come up and they ask what happened. I just say cigarettes.
Yeah,
And
don't,
then,
don't smoke.
Don't smoke. You just use an anti-smoking campaign.
Yeah, that's great.
No, it's all
I
good.
love that.
You were such a joy to get to know today.
You too.
Thank you so.
This
Thank you
was
for what you do. I can't
such
wait
a
to meet your
blessing.
wife and your
Yeah,
family.
I know.
We're
We'll
gonna
have to
break
get
bread.
together. Yeah, that'd be a blast. My daughter, my oldest, speaking of parents praying for their children to have a lighter burden in life, my oldest is on the autism spectrum, and my wife is too. She recently realized, and she around other people. With us, she'll talk all day, every day, but around other people, it's just extreme social anxiety. She, if we're at a restaurant, she can't, order, or she just kind of goes on shutdown mode. But we got her into this really great Montessori school, and it's just been. She's still like has a way to go with other adults, but with kids, she now will go up and play with any kid. The way they got her to open up after a couple of months in school without speaking, they notice she's way ahead when it comes to reading. And then one of the young girls in her class really struggles with reading. So her teacher said, "Hey, why don't you take her and the little reading nook and help her read because she's having a hard time." So that's what got her out of her shell. The first time she spoke in school was reading to one of her classmates.
Wow.
I'm starting to at these speaking engagements. I'm hoping to do something with Scottish Rite and here in Dallas because that's where I got all of my operations. And I remember going there as a child and seeing so many different kids that didn't have arms or legs, or kids in wheelchairs, or other kids that have a crooked back like me,
Yeah.
and all of it just was such a beautiful thing growing up, seeing that and being around so many different types of people and body types and people that have all sorts of different struggles. But they're still just kids that want to play and that want to be loved and to love. And it was a beautiful experience. So I'm wanting my daughter, now that she's coming out of her shell more, to go to some of these events with me and experience that as well. And how, she may think different or feel different than other kids, what is different anyway? We're all, unique in our own ways, but that's something we've talked about is her and my wife having autism think and feel differently than some other people do. I walk a little bit differently, but there's beauty in all of that. And there's things we
100%.
can do. We can use all of that for good. So
Amen.
yeah, I love it, man.
Man. Love you. Can I pray for
Love
everyone?
you too. Yes, please do.
God, we thank you that you love us and that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And we thank you, Lord, for heaven. And one day we're going to be completely perfect in our bodies, and feeling and emotional and psychological struggles will never, ever be there. Father, we thank you that one day there will be no spiritual warfare. And we thank you that we're going to be in full joy and full peace because of your Son. And we thank you that you would bless us today. Give us comfort and strength. Bless those who don't know you yet. Thank you for this show, and bless Jordan. And we thank you for those that have received a seed of faith in them today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I love you, man.
Love you too.
It was
Thanks
such a
for doing
pleasure.
this.
This is cool, dude.
Yeah, I had a blast.
Yeah.